The Midnight Menagerie, Chapter 3, Into the Woods. The silence that followed was alive. Every tick of the carriage clock was a hammer, and the kettle on the stove began to hiss, as though the house itself had started to sweat. The fog scraped faintly against the window panes. Not hard, just enough to remind them it was there. Sean Sr. turned from the door and forced his voice steady. "We hold till morning," he said again. But even as he said it, the words rang thin. The creek had never glowed before, and water didn't run backward unless the world meant to show its teeth. Amanda, Mama, took that breath she saved for when fear needed a boundary. "Then we hold together," she said, checking faces as if counting candles. "No one alone, not for anything." Wyatt slid the herb pouch so it rested high at his chest like a medal and lifted a hand in a half salute. "Roger that. Tactical formation. Huddle." Phoenix pressed closer to Amanda. His own pouch swung against his ribs like a tiny heartbeat. He could still feel the shape of the missing goat in the night's quiet. "Is Poppy scared?" he asked, not looking up, like the question might break if it saw the air. "No more questions for the dark," Meemaw said, very soft. The cat's tail slashed once, then stilled. "Listen first." Hank's rumble settled into a bass note. Stella stood with her paws braced wide and eyes fixed on the door. The kettle hissed louder, a thin, nervous sound in the throat of the room. Amanda moved automatically to lift it, then stopped, fingers hovering over the handle. "If the creek's wrong," she said without looking back, "we need to make sure the lanterns at the tree are right. If they go out, they don't go out." Wyatt said quickly, as if speed alone could bully a fact into place. Sean Sr. met Amanda's eyes. The look said what his mouth did not. "We can't wait for what's coming." He took his coat, slipped the spare herb pouch over his head, and squared the lantern's handle in his palm. "We check the tree. We check the pen. Then we come back. Fast. Together." Meemaw's gaze snapped to him. "Together," she repeated. "Or don't go." He nodded once. "Together, then." "Mom," Wyatt started. But Amanda was already tying the second scarf around Phoenix's neck, already slipping her own pouch into the inside of her coat. "If your dad steps outside into that role, I'm not letting the might count him alone," she said simply. She glanced at Wyatt. "And you, I'm not leaving you to make all the brave decisions without me," he finished, trying for a grin and managing a tilted version that made Phoenix's mouth twitch despite himself. They moved as a knot. Sean Sr. with the lantern in front, Amanda just off his shoulder with Phoenix's hand in hers, Wyatt to Phoenix's other side, the dogs on a forward line. Meemaw leaping to Amanda's elbow like an ornament that had decided to be a weapon. The chain lifted. The door opened to a pale breath of fog. Outside the night had gathered itself. The peach tree stood down the slope, lanterns shivering on their cords. Their light looked tired, as if the flames had been running a long time and were trying not to show it. Beyond the tree the woods waited, a black crowd holding its breath. From that direction came the faintest suggestion of light, like milk poured under glass. The creek, shining where it had no business to. "Close," Stella murmured, without moving her mouth much. Hank's hackles rose like a tide. They stepped off the porch boards into damp that touched their ankles and climbed, cool and persistent, like water deciding to learn a new trick. The lantern in Sean's hand threw a modest circle that made the fog around its edges seem thicker, more interested. Each footstep made a small sound, and the night kept each of those too. "Body system," Wyatt whispered, leaning his shoulder into Phoenix's. "Don't let go even if I tell a bad joke." "You always tell bad jokes," Phoenix whispered back. "Then we're very safe." They reached the peach tree. Close up, the lanterns were weirder. Light wobbled inside them as if it wasn't sure which way up was, the paper skins ticking against one another like a string of small, sly teeth. One lantern sighed out with a sharp pop. The dark it left behind was immediate and full. "Not wind," Amanda said, and wished she hadn't said it. Nemo's ears flattened. "He's testing the hems," she said, checking the stitch for loose thread. "Lanterns are hems," Wyatt said, because repeating metaphors helped them stay true. Sean Jr., quieter now than he had been an hour ago, swept the lantern outward. The light slid along the visible side of each trunk, avoided the invisible side, and found only fog where the rest of the world should have been. "Stay where you can touch someone," Sean Sr. said. "If the light dips, we do not scatter." He barely finished when something scraped in the goat pen, a soft, dry sound, like straw reconsidering itself. The four of them turned in unison. The pen set dimly to the left, a few boards brighter where the lantern kissed them. The latch was still pinned. The goat showed his clumped shadows in the shelter, bundled against the night. Poppy Phoenix whispered, urgent hope raising the word to a squeak. "Hold," Sean Singer said. The word was a hand on all their chests. Stella went first, moving with the kind of care that pretends it's casual. Hank flanked her, his shoulder a wall. They reached the fence and stood, heads lifted, sniffing the fence rails, the gate hinge, the low slats. After a long 3 breaths, Stella looked back and shook her head once. No fresh air where air should not be. Most strangers print, no goat hiding small. Something lifted her, Hank said, and even whispering, he sounded like an oath. The fog pressed its face to the pen boards and then backed away again, as if it had been invited to a game, but declined because no one had explained the rules. Wyatt fumbled for humor and found it bent. "When this is over, I'm teaching every goat on this property basic judo." "They'll teach you?" Amanda said, and a thin smile found her mouth and held there like a pin. A sound rose from the direction of the creek, at first a hum, then a whisper, then a shape of words without vowels. The glow under the fog brightened, threw a pale upwash against the underside of the low-hanging branches, and made the whole wood look lit from beneath by a shy moor. "Back," Meewall said. "He's interested." "We checked the tree lights," Sean Sr. said. "Then we go in." Another lantern at the peach tree hiccuped out. Somewhere high, a branch moved without wind. The fog thickened between them and the house, as if politely stepping into line. They closed ranks and started up the slope, and the house was suddenly farther than it had been, as if distance were a curtain someone had pulled between them and the porch. Phoenix stopped dead. "Mom," he said, and pointed. They followed his finger. In the work, just beyond the lowest boughs of the peach tree, sat a small shape. A chicken, speckled, hunched on its own feet, head tucked deep. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then it lifted its head and gave a grumbling, affronted cluck, as if accusing the night of poor hospitality. Wyatt let a laugh leak. "Penny. Again. Queen of dramatic timing." "False scare?" Amanda murmured, relieved in a way that made her knees wobbly. "Let's take her in." And she didn't finish. The lantern's flame gave a sudden lean, the way a person leans to hear a secret. The fog to the white drew itself long, thin as a blade, and then snicked back, as though it had made up its mind and changed it. Inside, Sean Sr. said, "Quiet. Absolute." They collected the chicken. Phoenix's small hands practiced now at tucking wings and keeping calm, and started for the porch in a tight knot. They had taken 4 steps when all the lanterns in a peach tree went out at once. Not a popper aside this time, more like a pinch, as if 2 unseen fingers had closed on every flame and snuffed 'em clean. The dark that followed felt heavy enough to wear. Wyatt's breath made a sound he didn't mean to make. "Okay," he said. "Voice thin, so that's bad." The glow from the creek pulsed brighter, like a heartbeat seen through a wrist. The fog in the trunks ahead moved, not like wind, like something inside it moving. "Do not run," Meewell said. "Running says yes to the chase." "Do not run," Sean Sr. echoed, "because human mouths sometimes need to say what cat mouths know." They didn't run, but they didn't dawdle either. The light from Sean's lantern drew their bodies into brief sculptures, ankle, hand, jaw, then let them go again as it swung. They reached the last stretch before the porch, boards showing flat and same, the rail graying up out of the fog. That was when they saw it. If you could call seeing what happens in a reflection seeing. The creek threw its wrong light up under the world, and in that reflected light something tall stood between 2 trumps across the yard, except it didn't stand. It hung, like a shape cut from the dark and pinned to the fog. It was long, where a person is not long, thin where a person should be full, the joints too sharp. It tilted its head without moving its neck. It looked like a shadow that had misread its body. Phoenix's fingers crushed Amanda's. She pulled his head against her coat. "Don't," she whispered into his hair. "Don't look." The thing turned its knot face toward the lantern. There were eyes, after all, though they weren't set where you'd guess. They glowed mild as foxfire, blank as corn dice. When it took a step, the ground under that step darkened. The fog around it leaned as if pleased. "Inside," Sean Sr. said, and this time "don't run" did not fit inside the word. They went. The porch steps took their weight with little groans. The door took Sean's hand like a friend you're not sure you can trust. He shoved it wide. Wyatt got Phoenix and Penny through. Amanda crossed the threshold backward, watching the yard. Sean stepped in last, and through the chain, the brass slid home like a furt swallowing. Hank and Stella stood with their front paws almost touching the line of the door, every muscle in their bodies poised as if they were a single bristled thought. Hank's growl came back, deeper, steadier, a note he meant to hold. Stella didn't growl. She watched, ears pricked, eyes bright, as if she were reading a page only dogs could read. The lantern's flame in the room steadied itself, just. Nemo leapt onto the table, arched, tail like a bottle brush, then folded down and went very still, her green eyes the only part of her that remembered to move. They waited, rating stretched, elastic, until it felt like it would snap. Something passed the window. Not a human height. Not human at all. Tall and thin, moving with a slide instead of a step. Its edges wet with creek light. It paused, and for a bleeding instant, the fog outside the glass smiled. Except fog cannot smile. The sense of smile reached through anyway, as clear as a draft. Wyatt kept his back against the door, because someone had to. "Well," he said, voice husky, not joking now. "Seems like we've made his to-do list." No one laughed, but the line of his shoulders helped. Amanda set Penny gently into a laundry basket and draped a towel over the edge to make it less like a trap and more like a nest. Phoenix stood so close to the basket, he was a wall. She touched his hair with the front of her fingers and then went and tucked the kettle back on the hot ring. It hissed as if offended. She found cups because doing something sane is its own defense. "Talk," she said without turning, "while we can." "Nemo." The cat did not look away from the window. "He does not push the door first," she said. "He pushes the mind. He looks for the one who imagines him most clearly." "Then don't," Wyatt said to everyone and to himself. "Don't imagine him." "Do not answer your name if it comes from the yard," Nemo went on. "Do not follow the sound of crying. Do not look into the creek longer than you'd look into a stranger's eyes." "Last time," Stella said, "we walked the fence and kept his face to us." She flicked her muzzle toward Hank. "We were younger then." "You're strong now," Phoenix said, surprising himself with how sure it came out. Stella's tail ticked once. "That'll do." The carriage clock marked the time with a disrespectfully cheerful chime. 1:30. The sound felt wrong in its own house and apologized by dying quickly. A spool rolled in the kitchen. Amanda's head snapped toward the sound, then relaxed with an effort. "Mouse," she said, and let the word win even if she didn't believe it. "All right," Sean Sr. said. Voice low, evenly cut. "We hold the line." Windows salted, herbs on the sills, lanterns lit. No one answers any call unless we can touch the mouth that made it. If the light dips, we move together to the center of the row. If the door rattles, we do not open, even if it's Uncle Troy. Wyatt said, because some habits don't break even when the dark is listening. If it's Uncle Troy, he knows to knock 3 and then shout something rude, Amanda said without missing the beat you needed to keep everyone breathing right. The fog outside pulled itself close to the glass, as if embarrassed to be left out of the conversation. They tried to be normal for a minute. That looked like Amanda pouring water she didn't expect anyone to drink. Wyatt pretending to juggle 2 apples and a potato until one thumped his shoulder. And Phoenix smiled with his teeth. Sean checking the latch again for the third time to see if Faith had changed the metal, Stella and Hank standing down from statues to statues with breathing, Meemaw sitting like a tidy bracket beside the lantern's glow. The glow from the creek swelled and then thinned, like lungs at a distance. A soft sound threaded the yard, a hum that wasn't quite a melody, the way a wire hums when wind learns to play it. Words brushed the edges of the room and slipped away. "Come closer." Amanda set her cup down so carefully it barely kissed the saucer. "He's at the creek," she said. "He wants us to look." "No," Meemaw said, and the word cut clean. But Phoenix had already turned his head, drawn by the wrong light the same way moths are drawn by right light. In the window glass he saw a version of outside that wasn't quite the outside, the reflection stealing their faces, giving them back thinner. Behind those copies, he thought he saw movement in the water where it shouldn't be, an arm, like a shadow, feeling its way under the current, sliding along stones, probing for an edge. "Phoenix," Amanda said, gentle but sharp. He blinked and looked away. The room remembered how to be a room. From the back of the house came a new sound, the faint clank of the back latch deciding whether to be trustworthy. Wyatt stiffened against the door. Hank pivoted in a single silent move, staring toward the kitchen. Stella's head turned with an exactitude that said she had located the thought behind the sound. "Don't," Meemaw said again. No louder than before, but impossible not to obey. The sound died, like a toy that's been picked up and carried into another room. The kettle began to whistle, finally finding its nerve. Amanda took it off the heat because she was tired of that sound being in her house. When she turned back, Sean Sr. was at the window, not looking out but standing near it like a guard. He put his palm flat to the wall beside the frame and closed his eyes, as if listening with something that wasn't ears. "Still with us?" Wyatt asked, aiming it at his dad and the night and maybe himself. "For now," Sean said, and opened his eyes. The lantern flame leaned again. This time, it did not steady quite right. A thin thread of soot curled in the globe. The light dimmed to the edge of doubt, and then, like a stubborn little heart, flared. The family exhaled together. Outside, something tall slid past the living room window and paused where the creek's pale underlight could reach it. They did not see it directly, only in the glass of the lantern, in the curl of reflection on the dark wood of the table, in the way a pair of foxfire eyes blinked in the shine and did not blink in the world. The shape held, and smiled again, the way Fob smiles when it remembers faces. Hank's growl climbed half a note. Stella took one deliberate step forward and planted her paw. "Listen," Meemaw said, her voice gone thin with focus. From the crake, a voice arrived that was not a voice. 5 years. It breathed, words braided from water and bark and the space between. 5 years gone, 5 years kept. Wyatt's hand found Phoenix's shoulder and squeezed. "You're kept," he said, half to Phoenix, half to the room, a little to himself. "Back to center," Sean said, and they moved, 1, 2, 3 steps closer to the lantern's circle, until they were a small braced island of breath and heat. The voice at the creek came again, curious now. "Light," it said, and the lantern flame dipped in something like a bow. "Laughter," it said, and Phoenix, against his will, hiccuped a sound that meant, "I am small and trying." "Names," it said, and for a heartbeat the air in the room smelled faintly of their own hair. "Don't answer," Meemaw whispered, as though anyone could. The fog at the window thinned. Just a shade. Behind it, at the edge of the trees, they saw not the thing itself, but the space it made. A tall absence. It reached one branch-long arm toward the house and stopped, as if a line had been chalked on the ground that it would not yet cross. The creek brightened, pleased, like a crowd that gets a trick. Game. The voice breathed, amused. "We play." "Not tonight," Stella said. And if words can snarl, hers did. The absence tilted its head and considered the door as if it could smell the chain through the wood. Then it withdrew a fraction, enough to make the room think maybe it had gone, not enough to believe it. The carriage clock lifted its hands and brought them down softly. The knight took the sound and put it in its pocket. Amanda reached for Sean's hand and found it. Wyatt let his head tap the door gently once, as if to remind it of its job. Phoenix moved the laundry basket an inch closer to the lantern, just in case towels were talismans. Meemaw's whiskers quivered with a humor that didn't reach her eyes. The dogs breathed like drums. Somewhere outside, under their land, the backward creek kept moving, patient, certain, bearing its pale freight upstream. At the window, that long, wrong silhouette thinned until it was only suggestion. Then not even that. But the air it left behind stayed colder. The fog stayed eager. The house stayed listening to itself. "We hold till morning," Sean said again, and this time the words had weight, not because morning had promised anything, but because the family had. From the yard, from the creek, from the trees, came a whisper that wasn't a whisper, a laugh that wasn't a laugh. It lingered like a wet thumb on the rim of a glass. The night smiled, patient, playful, certain, and pressed its face to the glass of the world. It had seen them, it had counted, and now the game had truly begun.